our cells and nourish our yin, nourish the substance. So in winter, a diet that produces heat, that's more heat producing, is beneficial. It's going to keep you a little warmer. So think first how you cook your food. Longer cooking temperatures are going to produce more of a heating effect in your food. So that's crock pot, baking, stewing. So soups and stews are just excellent. And overall, thinking about eating mostly warm cooked foods all winter. So your digestion, your body has to warm up any cold food that you put into it to the body's temperature before it can adequately digest that food. So by giving it already warm cooked foods, your body has to work less hard in digesting that food. So number one, eat mostly warm cooked foods. If you have a cold sandwich, have a cup of soup with that. If you bring a salad to work, let it sit on the counter. It's perfectly fine, especially in the winter. It's not going to get that hot. It might not get warm at all. It wants to be cold when you eat it. So yeah, and just keep that in mind. The different types of foods to eat. So in winter, we're thinking things that grow below the ground. Think of spring, shoots coming up out of the ground, salads, greens, those are great for eating in the spring. But in the winter, when we want to nourish yin, your root vegetables, your carrots, your potatoes, your turnips, beets are excellent nourishing. Sweet potatoes give you longer lasting energy, very warming and nourishing, again, for the yin. A couple other foods like garlic and ginger are very warming as well. So if you're a cold person, chai tea would be excellent for you. That ginger and the spices, the cinnamon in the chai tea, something that's going to increase circulation and warm you as well. Whole grains, I'm not talking whole grain bread, I'm talking like actual whole grain, like millet, barley, oat groats, not rolled oats, things like that. So they're less starchy than your regular grains, and then other carbohydrates. So experimenting with some more of the whole grains like the quinoa, millet, things like that, versus having like noodles, spaghetti. Incorporate some of those into your diet, and they're gonna stay with you longer. Like quinoa is a very high in protein grain, and so it's going to fill you up for longer. It's not going to have that sugar release like simple carbohydrates like your breads and your pasta, and those types of things will stay with you longer. I want to talk a little bit about the seaweeds. Seaweeds like kelp, dulse, and nori are also very high in protein. So when you think seaweeds, a lot of times people think, oh, sushi, I have to eat sushi. No, you don't. I don't like sushi. So if you don't like sushi, no worries. You can buy seaweed, you can buy kombu sticks in the grocery store and throw them in with your soups and stews or your rice. And so I noticed this book was one of the books back there. This is absolutely wonderful, defining all the seasons, a lot of things that April was talking about. So not just nutrition, but the way we look at the seasons. It's just a really good book. And I was just going to give you a couple more foods. Staying healthy with the seasons. Also, idea of driving out cold through food. We can use different flavors for warming methods. Of course, the food preparation, like I was talking about to begin with, how we prepare our foods. For chronic conditions, we use warm and sweet foods. There's just a whole bunch of foods that are more warming. Squashes are very good this time of year. Dark leafy greens, things you wouldn't even think of. Trout, walnuts. And herbs, rosemary, nutmeg, onion, like I mentioned earlier, the turmeric, the cinnamon, coriander, things like that. Dates, chicken is very warming. Goat milk, lamb, leeks. And so this is a book that we use in our practice a lot when we're differentiating patterns of disharmonies. It's just basically what we do. Like April was talking about. 5 different people can come with arthritis, and we give maybe each of them a different diagnosis depending on what we find by looking at the tongue and taking pulses. So this just, we see a person that's really cold, we give them, a handout on cold foods to warm them, to drive out cold. If they have too much of a heat pattern, problems with heat, men more likely have that than women, we'll give them foods to cool them down internally. You can have internal heat, internal cold. Cold can cause you to cause stagnation, obstruction. When you're cold, things just shut down. In the winter, you have a tendency for your shoulders to rise because you're cold and you're trying to stay warm, which is why we advocate the scarf. The cold can also enter the channels. Sorry, I'm getting off the food a little bit here, but it all goes together.
It melts. It's very hard to stay.
The bladder channel is where cold and wind enter first, in the back of the neck, which is why we advocate covering the scarf. You know, Grandma was right, keep your neck covered. It can enter, bladder channel runs all the way down to the back. It can enter just sitting on a cold surface for a long period of time. Cold can enter that way. So again, keeping covered up, applying the cooking practices, eating the warming foods. What else do I want to say about food?
We could just go on forever about food, quite honestly.
I've got
Yes.
a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You were mentioning poultry.
Yes.
I was told by a physician that, in fact, if you're not using organic, that poultry is worse for you than beef because they are bringing so many hormones.
And I would totally agree with that. I have 3 daughters. They're all teenagers. And I was very worried about poultry, so I purchased organic poultry without growth hormones.
Right.
Because it's true. I mean, think about the size of a chicken breast in the store. It's like the size of a turkey breast used to be.
Yeah. That's why
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, their menstrual cycles earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I do really buy, and I buy like organic chicken broth.
And this was
yeah.
from a vegetarian. He said eat beef instead of.
Well, I think if you buy organically raised chicken, I think that's perfectly fine because they're not stuffed full of the growth hormones.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
It causes a lot of health issues.
It does. Well, and eating a ton of protein, protein twice a day from an animal, that's heavy. That's a really high protein source, and it's a lot of meat anyway. So having the alternate protein sources, including the beans, the legumes, things like that, is great too.
Yeah. We definitely encourage free-range, organic, clean meat. I mean, we have just created a huge amount of problems in our society with health and so forth, just because of what we've done.
Have you seen that Jenny's lunch line downtown?
Oh yes, we use
all
Jenny.
organic.
Yeah.
We order.
They deliver.
They deliver.
We know that.
Yes.
They're very good. Yeah.
Any other questions about food specifically? I'll be happy to answer more after we're done, or now, if you can think of anything. And usually when someone comes in for a consultation, we do consultations, we do the aromatherapy. We do give them food recommendations. That's the place that we start.
Yeah.
We a lot of times will ask someone, are you interested in herbs? Because a lot of times herbs can just give that added push oomph that they need to set them on a path that's going to help heal their disharmony. But a lot of times, if they're not interested in that, we give them a lot of food recommendations. This is where you can start. This is where you can be consistent. Another thing to keep in mind, too, is the rule of 80-20. 80% of the time, eat well. The other 20%, get those Christmas cookies in. Have some pie. I mean, you can't just totally limit yourself. You have to enjoy food.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 80-20 is